Hey guys. So someone recently asked, is it possible within TickTick to search for tasks on a particular date or maybe within a particular date range? And the answer to that question is yes. Well, maybe, depending on what you mean. So today we're going to look at the search functionality, and in particular the search functionality that uses the date range and the date filters. Hello, I'm Joshua Best. All right, so I'm going to jump in here to TickTick, and I'm going to start in my green folder, and I want to show you my green project tasks. And in particular, I want to look at my test cycle tasks. So I have a test cycle 1, test cycle 2, test cycle 3. Those are all completed. And you can see up here I have a test cycle 4 that's due tomorrow and a test cycle 5. All right, now let's take a look at some of the dates. So test cycle 1 and test cycle 2, they didn't have any due date. So I didn't set a due date on those tasks at all. Now, if I look at test cycle 3, I did set a due date of January 31st on that particular task. Now, I did add the completed dates to each of these tasks in the task description, but just to kind of show you, let's go to test cycle 1. And if I go to the task activities, I can see that the completed date is January 1, and I just added that in the description up here so it was easily accessible. So these three are the important tasks to pay attention to as we move into the search functionality. I also have test cycle 4 and 5 up here, just kind of for completeness. So these are tasks that are not yet completed. Cycle 4 due tomorrow, so due in the future. And test cycle 5, no due date, and it's not completed yet. So just to kind of give us a variety of different tasks and different dates. So let's go to the search functionality. So I'm going to come over here and click the magnifying glass, which is the search icon, and a search window pops up prompting me to enter something to search for. So that's one thing I want to point out here is I can't just go straight to the date filters. I can't say, show me all tasks within a particular date range. I'm required to enter something into the search criteria first. Let's go ahead and enter test cycle. And then I'm going to hit the enter key. All right, so what this gives us is all 5 of our test cycles, which is what we would expect. We have test cycle 1 through 5. And I can clearly see over to the right side, test cycle 3 had a due date of January 31st, and test cycle 4 has a due date of tomorrow. And so that's all good. My business scenario or my use case that I want to search for is what test cycles were done in January. So I've searched for test cycles so far. Now let's filter down based on dates. So if I come over here to the left underneath the search title, I can pick this week, this month, or other date. I'm going to pick other date, and I'm going to choose January 1st through January 31st. All right, go ahead and confirm that. So I'm left with just one task when I do that filter, and that's test cycle 3. And it's funny because that task was completed in February. So, if my use case was I'm looking for test cases that were completed in January, this is not going to get it for me. So basically what this search does is it only pays attention to the due date. And since my due date on this test cycle was January 31st, it pulls into this filter, even though I didn't actually complete this task until February. Okay, so a couple things, right? We do have the functionality within TickTick to search for a particular date or a particular date range with a couple nuances that we need to be aware of. The first one being that we have to search for something first. We can't just go pull all tasks in a particular date range. We have to search for something. And in this case, I searched for test cycle first. So that's number one. And number two is that the date filter only pays attention to the due date. So it doesn't pay attention to when the task was completed necessarily. It really just pays attention to the due date. And so just to prove that one other way, if you remember we had test cycle 4 and test cycle 5, and test cycle 4 had a due date of tomorrow on it. So let me just change my date filter here to this month, which is February. And you can see that for test cycles in February, I only have test cycle 4 because it's the only one that has a due date. Test cycle 5 didn't have a due date, even though maybe most likely it would be done in February, but TickTick doesn't know that for sure. But test cycle 5 didn't have a due date or a completed date. So that one kind of makes more sense to me. So in my opinion, this is a useful feature, especially if you are in the habit of putting due dates on tasks. In my opinion, it could be a lot better if we could get a little more granular and maybe search by either due date or completed date. Because in my opinion, completed date would almost be the better one to filter on. I would be more interested in when tasks were completed in the past. But I could see where due date is also useful. So I'd be interested to know how you guys use search within TickTick. Do you search for tasks in the past, or do you search for tasks in the future? Do you use this date range functionality? Or do you use some of these other filters that we didn't talk about today, like the lists, tags, status? Let me know in the comments how you guys use search. Well, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.